Okay, so let us continue with the topic which we have not covered in the last lecture, clubbing of income. This is the last topic of clubbing of income, and after this the clubbing of income is over. In the last class we were discussing the topic clubbing of income, and which sections we have covered. If you remember, section 60, 61, 63, which is only definition, and 64 subsection 1, clause 2, clause 4, clause 6, clause 7, clause 8. So effectively I have covered, and then 64 subsection 1a also. Effectively I have covered with you already 8 different topics or 8 different subtopics of clubbing of income, under which income is to be taxed in the hands of not the person who is earning the income, but in the hands of some another person who has transferred the asset, because of which another person is earning the income. We have covered around 8 points of clubbing of income. Only one point is left now. After this, the chapter clubbing of income is over, and the last topic or section is 64 subsection 2. Now let me show you the act, and then let us bind up section 64 subsection 2 also. After this, clubbing is over. Is the screen visible? Is the website visible? Font size clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me read for you section 64 subsection 2. We have covered section 64 subsection 1. We have covered section 64 subsection 1a. And now let us cover the last section of this chapter, section 64.2. Carefully see this. Where in the case of an individual, still this section is also applicable only to an individual. My earlier sections were also applicable only to an individual. So where in the case of an individual being, now when I want to say my earlier sections were also applicable to an individual, I was talking about section 64. If you remember, in section 60 and 61 there was not such condition. Let me make clarification. Now this was section 60. In section 60, Act uses the word any person. So whenever, so this is what we have discussed earlier, but let me clarify so that if there is any confusion, that should not prevail. Whenever there is no transfer of asset, only transfer of income, then clubbing is applicable in the hands of the transferor, and in that case it's not necessary that the transferor is an individual. The transferor can be HUF, firm, company, association, any person. So clubbing is applicable basically to an individual only as far as section 64 is concerned. But as per section 60, clubbing can be applicable to any person. Similarly, in section 61 also, in case of revocable transfer, here also Act uses the word any person. So clubbing under section 61 is also applicable to any person, not only an individual. So under section 60 and 61, clubbing can be applicable to any person. But under 64, clubbing is applicable only to an individual. This is what you should remember. If you see the heading of 61, it says income of individual to include. So I think yesterday I was telling you that clubbing is applicable only to an individual. My intention was only to talk about section 64 in that case. In 60 and 61, section 60, 61, clubbing is applicable to any person, but under 64, clubbing is applicable only to an individual. Now I am continuing my discussion to 64.2. Let me show you 64.2. What it says. Think carefully. Where in the case of an individual being a member of HUF, now just because HUF word has come, it does not mean that clubbing is applicable to an HUF, to a Hindu undivided family. Clubbing is still applicable to an individual. But who is this individual? A person who is a member of HUF. That means if I am not a member of any HUF, I'm not supposed to read section 64.2. If you as an individual are not a member of any HUF, you are not supposed to refer section 64.2. Only which individual will refer 64.2? An individual who is a member of HUF. So HUF word has come into picture, but it doesn't mean that clubbing is applicable to an HUF. Clubbing is still applicable to an individual, because Act still says in the case of an individual. 64.2 also talks about for an individual assessee. Now, where any property having being the separate property of the individual. Suppose I have a property and I'm a member of HUF. I have a property. It is my property, not the property of my family. It is my separate property. At any time after 31st December 1916, ignore the date, have been converted by the individual into the property belonging to the family through the act of impressing such separate property with the character of property belonging to the family, or throwing it into the common stock of the family, or has been transferred by an individual directly or indirectly to the family. Otherwise than for adequate consideration. That's it. Now its simple concept is what? I have a Hindu undivided family, and for example there are 4 members in my family. For example, there are 4 members. I am the senior most member, for example. So I will be Karta, my spouse, and my 2 children. Suppose this is the structure of a Hindu undivided family. I had my own property. It was not the family of HUF, it was my property. But what I did, I gave this property to my HUF now. Initially, it was my property. I purchased this property from my own money. So it was totally my property. 100% I was the owner. Now I am giving this property to my family. So I will not be the owner then. Who will become the owner? All 4 now. I, my spouse, my 2 children. It is my property. Now I am giving it to my HUF. So Act says what? Why you are giving to your family? If it is given, see the highlighted text, without adequate consideration. Now, when the property is having market value 80 lakh, I am giving it for 80 lakh. Government says there is no issue of clubbing because there is no tax avoidance at your end. Because when you will say that you have sold the property to your HUF, you will compute capital gain as a seller. So there is no problem. But the problem is why you are giving this owned property to your HUF without adequate consideration. What is the reason behind it? So government doubt that intention. If this is the case, in a HUF, whenever any individual member gives any property, and see in the Act, Income Tax Act, whenever the word property is written, don't assume it as immovable property only. That can be movable also. It depends on respective section. What do I mean by property? So don't get confused with the word property. Property in layman terms, in general parlance, property can be treated as immovable, but for the purpose of taxation, it can be movable also. It can be intangible also. It can be anything. So whenever any member who is a member of HUF transfer his or her owned property to the entire family without adequate consideration, government says clubbing comes into picture. Now this property As the act says, see the highlighted text, the property is so converted or transferred being hereinafter referred to as the converted property. So just to simplify the act says that will be treated as converted property for the purpose of reading the act. Then what happens if this is the case? When as a member you are transferring your own property, 100% ownership of the property you are transferring to the family without adequate consideration. Why? If this is the case, government says that then, notwithstanding anything contained in any other provision of this act or in any other law for the time being in force, then it does not matter what other section says. For the purpose of computation of total income of the individual under this act for any year, that means when I will compute the income, my income, then for this property, what will happen? I will continue to be the owner of the property. The individual shall be deemed to have transferred the converted property to the family, to the members of the family for being held by them jointly. No issue. That means, of course, it is obvious, bit obvious that I will be treated as the person who has transferred the property. No issue. The main clubbing comes here. The income derived from this converted property or any part thereof shall be deemed to arise to the individual and not to the family. This is the main point of clubbing. Suppose when I was the owner of the property is giving me annual rent of 10 lakh rupees. I was the owner of the property is giving me the annual rental income of 10 lakh rupees. I have given this property to my family now, and everyone become the owner. So after I have donated this property to my family without adequate consideration, I will not receive 10 lakh now. I will receive only 2 lakh 50. My wife will receive 2 lakh 50. My two sons will receive, two sons or daughter or son or daughter, whatever is the combination, they also will receive 2 lakh 50 each. So now I am earning only 2 lakh 50 after this transfer. But Act says all the rental income even after converting this property as the joint property of the family, it will be clubbed. That means 2 lakh 50 which is earned by my wife now, 250 which is earned by my children 1, 2 lakh 50 which is earned by my child 2. I will continue to pay the tax on their incomes also from this converted property. This is clubbing. That's it. Point clear or not? If not clear, please raise your hand. If not, sorry, if clear, raise your hand. If point is clear, please raise your hand. If point is clear, please raise your hand. Okay. So what I have discussed in section 64 subsection 2, when as an individual I had my property, I transferred this property to my family without adequate consideration. Whatever income even after transfer, whatever income will be earned by my HUF family members, I will continue paying tax on those incomes also. This is clubbing under section 64(2). Now next stage starts then. Next stage starts. Now I transferred this property, and for example, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, again some dispute happened, and the property which is now family property, that is subsequently partitioned. Earlier it was my property, 100% my property. I transferred it to my family. Now after 4 years, when dispute arises, the property will not come back to me. Just because I transferred it initially, it doesn't give me the right to claim that property 100% back. Because now the property does not belong to me. It was my problem that I transferred it to my family, but my family will not give it to me now. Family will partition equally. So if there are four members, then the property will be partitioned equally. So I will get only 1/4 share now. 1/4 my spouse will get, 1/4 ownership my child 1 will get, and 1/4 ownership my child 2 will get. Earlier it was 100% my property. I transferred it to my family, and I am getting back not 100%, only 1/4 share. Then also clubbing is applicable. This is what the point is. C point. Close C. What it says now. where the converted property has been subject matter of partition. For example, after some time dispute happens, whether partial or total, amongst the members of the family, the income derived from such converted property as is received by the spouse, only by the spouse, received by the spouse on partition shall be deemed to arise to the spouse from assets transferred directly by the individual to the spouse, and the provisions of subsection 1 shall so far as may apply accordingly. That means after partition, income was 250, 250, 250, 250 each. Now again, when property gets partitioned, 250 husband is earning, 250 spouse is earning, 250 child 1 is earning, 250 child 2 is earning. Child 1 and child 2 clubbing will not be applicable on those incomes, but whatever my wife is earning, clubbing is applicable in my hands. Little bit technical. Let me assume an example and then let me show you the case. Let me assume an example first. Is the word file visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, now this is the case. Mr. X was the owner of the property which is giving the annual rental income of 10 lakh rupees. And rather than date, let me write during the previous year 2019-20. Mr. X was the owner of the property which is giving the annual rental income of 10 lakh. During the previous year 1920, the property was transferred by him to the HUF without adequate consideration. So clubbing comes into picture. And what will happen? while computing rental income, before transferring the property, to the family, rental income was taxable in whose hands? In the hands of Mr. X. There is no problem. There is no question of clubbing. When I was the owner, I will pay the tax. But clubbing comes into picture even after transfer. Rental income after transferring the property, still that will continue to be taxable in the hands of Mr. X as per the provisions of section 64 subsection 2. This is the point. Before transferring the property, there is no question of clubbing. I am the owner and I will continue to pay the tax. But even after transferring the ownership also, though section 22 of house property says that assessor should be the owner of the property. After transferring the property to the HUF, owners are X, Mrs. X, child A and child B. Still, I have to continue paying tax to the government of India on 10 lakh rupees by applying the provisions of house property. Is this 64 too clear or not? Please raise your hand if this point is clear. Okay. Now, for example, after 3 years, some dispute arises. After 3 years, this property was to be partitioned. If it is partitioned, now I have no right to get back my 100% share. Just because I transferred, it doesn't give me the right to get back that property. So HUF will not give this 100% property to me. HUF will partition this property to me equally. If the property was to be partitioned by the HUF, each member will get equal share. Each member will get equal share. That means, how will you compute the income now? X, Mrs. X, A and B. Rental income. First of all, 2,50,000 each. 2,50,000 each. $250 each. Now, do you think it is correct? Answer is no, it is not correct. Now, logically, these people are earning the income, but this spouse income, this lady is whatever earning, is continue to be taxable not in her hands, but in the hands of 2,50,000. This is again because of clubbing. The only point is now I am applying again section 64 to, if you remember, it is clause C, and here I was applying clause B. This is the only difference. This is the only difference. So this income will not be taxable in the hands of Mrs. X. It will be taxable in the hands of transferor, individual. Please raise your hand if this point is clear. That's it. My chapter clubbing is over now. Please raise your hand if this point is clear. Any problem, please ask. इसलिए जो ट्रांसफर करता है उसको बड़ा ध्यान से ट्रांसफर करना चाहिए. ट्रांसफर करने से पहले भी खुद पे करता है, ट्रांसफर करने के बाद भी खुद पे करता है टैक्स, और ट्रांसफर के बाद पार्टीशन जब हो जाएगा तो भी स्पाउस की इनकम पे खुद ही टैक्स पे करेगा. So that person should not take the decision just to save the tax. If there are some genuine issues, then that person should take the decision of transferring. Otherwise, there is no benefit of taxation in that case. I hope the point is clear. Now, if I make one change, now topic is over. Let me make one change. or let us not make any change. This is the point. Let us not make any change further. That is more than sufficient. My section 64.2 is over. And now I would like to discuss with you from my book some common points. Otherwise, clubbing is over now. These are some good points, so I would like to show those points to you. These are miscellaneous points which you should remember. Negative income will also be clubbed. This is my first point. You must note down these points only. Negative income is also to be clubbed. Just because income is negative, department cannot say that no, I will not club it now. Act says clubbing is conceptual, just not dependent on whether the income is positive or negative. Because when you club negative income, there is a benefit to the assessee in whose income the income will be clubbed, because his total income falls, his or her total income falls. So in that case, department cannot refuse that negative income we will not club. No, clubbing's intention is just to make sure that genuine provisions are applied. Whether it is beneficial to the assessee or harmful to the assessee, this is not the job. So negative income will also be clubbed. Next point. This point I have already told you that clubbing is broadly applicable to an individual assessees as per section 64, but as per section 60 and 61, it is applicable to all the assessees. Next point. Keeping the asset received in same form or in different form doesn't matter. Now, simply understand it with the help of an example. I transferred rupees 10 lakh to my wife. For example, I transferred rupees 10 lakh to my wife without divorce condition, without adequate consideration. Just because of no reason, I transferred 10 lakh to my wife. She deposited the amount in a bank and earned 10% interest per year. She deposited my 10 lakh rupees in her bank account and is earning 10% interest per annum. How much is the income which she is earning? Can you tell me how much is the income which she is earning per year? How much is the income which she is earning per year? Reply. How much is the income which she is earning per year? If I transfer 10 lakh rupees to my spouse, she has deposited 10 lakh in a bank. Bank is giving her 10% interest. So how much per year income she is earning?
Sir, 1 lakh.
1
Per
lakh.
year, 1 lakh.
Per year 1 lakh. Okay, per year my wife is earning 1 lakh. Now, who will pay the tax on this income? Can you tell me now who will pay the tax on this income?
Sir, husband.
Husband, because of section 64 subsection 1 clause. Do you remember the clause? It is clause 4. Very good. Now see what happens. The cash which I have transferred, my wife has not deposited that cash in a bank. She purchased a house of 10 lakh rupees. She purchased a house of 10 lakh rupees. And she purchased the house of 10 lakh rupees and gave that house on rent, from where she is earning 1 lakh per year rental income. In earlier case, whatever cash I transferred to her, she was earning 1 lakh on that cash. Now, whatever cash I transferred to her, she purchased a house and started earning 1 lakh as rental income from that house. Now, can you tell me, is clubbing applicable on this rent or not? Answer is yes. Answer is yes. This is what the highlighted text says keeping the asset received in same form or in different form doesn't make any difference. The source is what? House. The house has also been purchased from that money which I transferred without adequate consideration. So this is based on Honorable Supreme Court ruling in 1995. CIT versus Srimati Pileti Sridevi Ma. This is the Honorable Supreme Court ruling, and Honorable Supreme Court has said that it does not matter whether you have changed the form of your asset or you are keeping the asset in the same form, clubbing is still applicable. If this point is clear, please raise your hand. Hurry up. Next point. Very good. Now next point. Again see this example with a fresh mind. I transferred 10 lakh rupees to my wife. She purchased, or not purchased, I transferred 10, okay. I transferred 10 lakh to my wife. She deposited in a bank. And from there, she earned 1 lakh rupees per year. I told you that on 1 lakh rupees, husband will pay the tax as per section 64, subsection 1, clause 4. But that 1 lakh interest is also given my wife to some other person at 15% interest rate, and from there she has earned 15,000 rupees. From my 10 lakh, she was earning 1 lakh on which clubbing applied. On that 1 lakh rupees, she again gave that 1 lakh rupees to another person and earned 15,000 rupees. My question is clubbing applicable on this 15,000 or not? Kindly reply. Or even if you don't know, make a logic to reply. Is clubbing applicable on this 15,000 also? Clubbing is applicable on 1 lakh rupees without any doubt. Is clubbing applicable on this 15,000 also or not?
Sir, can you please repeat the point once?
I transferred 10 lakh rupees to my wife. My wife deposited this 10 lakh at 10% interest in a bank. From there, she will earn 1 lakh rupees. So this 1 lakh is subject to clubbing of income under section 64, subsection 1, clause 4 without any problem. 1 lakh is clubbing. Is it clear till this point? Is it clear till this point?
Yes, sir.
Now this 1 lakh also, she has deposited with the same bank or another bank, doesn't matter. And now she is earning 15,000 interest income. My question is 15,000 also subject to clubbing or not? Anyone who can reply, is 15,000 is also subject to clubbing or not? Answer is no. Answer is no. This 15,000 will not be clubbed because the source of 15,000 is 1 lakh, and 1 lakh I have not received, or 1 lakh my wife has not received from me. 1 lakh was her own generation of income. So clubbing is applicable on income from assets transferred, not from income from assets transferred. Point clear? Let me show you that concept. This is Honorable Supreme Court ruling in Sevantilal Maneklal Seth versus CIT 1968. Income from assets transferred is not clubbed. If you remember the act, if you remember section 64, it says income from assets transferred. Now this 15,000 is not from income from asset transferred. It is an income from assets transferred. So this 15,000 is this highlighted income. If you can see the screen, 15,000 is earned from this income, which is 1 lakh, and this 1 lakh was earned from which asset, which was 10 lakh. So the chain is only at first stage. If from anything which I received from my spouse, if whatever I have earned from that asset, that is clubbing, but income which is earned from that asset, income from that asset is not at all subject to clubbing. Point clear or not? Raise your hand. If it is clear, please raise your hand. Okay. Now, under which head clubbing is applicable? Head of income remains same. First of all, you compute the income of every person separately, whether it is salary head, house property head, PGBP head, capital gain head, or other sources. At first, you complete the income of every person under different heads separately, final income. Then you apply clubbing. And when you apply clubbing in the hands of the person where the income will be clubbed, heads of income remain same. If my spouse house property income is clubbed in my hands, I will show under my head also house property. If my spouse PGBP income is clubbed in my hands, I have to show even in my head PGBP income of my spouse. So heads of income remains same. That's it. Point clear? Please raise your hand. Okay, now the chapter clubbing of income is over. And any problem in the clubbing, you please ask. If you have any problem, please unmute and ask. Clubbing is over. Any problem, you can ask.